I really like men with muscles like yours. Darnell Hayes didn't look up. Not immediately. His arms were deep inside the engine of a Gulfstream G800. His shirt soaked in sweat, sleeves rolled tight against forearms hardened by years of manual labor. Grease coated his knuckles, dust clung to his boots, and the midday Georgia heat rose off the tarmac like a silent furnace. He thought maybe he'd misheard. Then came the voice again, velvety, crisp, amused. I mean it. That tension in your shoulders? Those arms were made for sculpture. This time Darnell tilted his head, squinting against the glare of the sun. A woman stood just a few feet away, the wind tugging at the hem of her navy blue blazer. She wore a pair of designer sunglasses, dark slacks, and heels that didn't belong anywhere near an airfield. But she stood there like she owned the runway, and in a way, she did. Cassandra Vail, CEO of Vail Aerospace, heiress to one of the largest private aviation empires in the country. On paper, she was worth more than the entire county Darnell grew up in. But in this moment, she looked more like a curious art critic than a business mogul. Darnell wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his wrist. Ma'am, he said, voice steady. I'm just here to fix the problem. Exactly, she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. And you're the only one who seems to care that there's a real one. 2 hours earlier, Darnell had been loading his toolbox into his rusted Ford F-150 when the call came through. Emergency jet maintenance, Gulfstream, private airstrip outside Savannah. No details, just urgency, and an offer for triple pay. He almost declined. Triple pay usually meant triple nonsense. But rent was due, and his daughter needed new shoes for the school year, so he took the job. Now, standing beneath the body of a $60 million aircraft, Darnell could smell the danger. Literally, the faint scent of scorched rubber and fuel vapor was enough to make his stomach turn. Whoever last touched this engine had no business near aircraft. He reached deeper, eyes narrowing. The heat shielding was warped. A clamp near the ignition coil was too loose. The fuel line? Swollen. One backfire and this jet would have turned into a mid-air fireball. Darnell muttered under his breath. Someone's either stupid or planning something. Behind him, a group of men in tailored suits were watching through the hangar glass, arms crossed, faces smug. One of them laughed. Another pulled out a phone to film. That's when Cassandra walked past them all. And that's when she spoke the words no one expected from a woman in her position. Darnell stepped back from the engine, slowly lowering the panel cover. This thing's not just broken, he said, meeting her gaze. It's been tampered with. Cassandra didn't blink. Show me. He hesitated. Then she surprised him again. She pulled off her sunglasses, eyes sharp and blue as cut glass, and took a step closer, heels clicking with purpose. I've flown since I was 16. Built my first kit plane at 19. I know what a stressed frame smells like. This one's been cooked from the inside. Darnell gave a short nod. Exactly. Someone rerouted the heat exhaust. Fed pressure back into the main line. Her brow furrowed. Could it have been an accident? No, ma'am. This was intentional. Quiet, delayed, perfect for a crash over water. Silence fell between them. The wind shifted, carrying the distant sound of an engine startup from another hangar. Cassandra exhaled slowly, eyes still locked on the aircraft like it had betrayed her. I have to fly this jet tomorrow morning. I was heading to Houston for a military contract. Then don't, Darnell said flatly. She turned toward him again. What if I told you you're the first one to see it? My team cleared this bird yesterday. Then your team's either blind or bought. Another silence. Then Cassandra said something that would change the direction of everything that followed. Can you stay? I want you to check every inch of this aircraft. I trust you more than I trust the men in that glass tower. Darnell hesitated. That's not wise. I don't belong in your world, Miss Vale. Cassandra tilted her head. Then maybe my world's the one that doesn't belong. Outside, the sun was beginning its descent. The heat softened, but the air remained thick with pressure like something bigger was about to ignite. Darnell looked once more at the jet, then at the woman who had just asked him without asking to step deeper into something far more dangerous than a mechanical repair. He looked down at his hands. Scarred, greasy, solid. Then, quietly, he said, I'll stay, but I'm not here to impress anyone. And Cassandra Vale replied, not missing a beat. Good. I'm tired of being impressed. I just want the truth. What do you think will happen next? Will Darnell fall for Cassandra Vale? Hit the like button or drop a 9 in the comments if you're hoping for it. I really like men with muscles like yours. Darnell Hayes didn't look up. Not immediately. His arms were deep inside the engine of a Gulfstream G800. His shirt soaked in sweat, sleeves rolled tight against forearms hardened by years of manual labor. Grease coated his knuckles, dust clung to his boots, and the midday Georgia heat rose off the tarmac like a silent furnace. He thought maybe he'd misheard. Then came the voice again, velvety, crisp, amused. I mean it. That tension in your shoulders? Those arms were made for sculpture. This time, Darnell tilted his head, squinting against the glare of the sun. A woman stood just a few feet away, the wind brushing the hem of her form-fitting ivory dress that hugged her frame with understated elegance. The neckline was tasteful, the fabric smooth, her heels delicate yet defiant against the concrete. She held herself with grace, not the showy kind, but the kind that made silence feel like attention. Cassandra Vale, CEO of Vale Aerospace, heiress to one of the largest private aviation empires in the country. On paper, she was worth more than the entire county Darnell grew up in. But in this moment, she looked less like royalty and more like a paradoxa woman, in a dress far too refined for a runway, standing still before a man covered in engine grease. Darnell wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his wrist. Ma'am, he said, voice steady, I'm just here to fix the problem. Exactly, she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. And you're the only one who seems to care that there's a real one. 2 hours earlier, Darnell had been loading his toolbox into his rusted Ford F-150 when the call came through. Emergency jet maintenance, Gulfstream, private airstrip outside Savannah. No details, just urgency, and an offer for triple pay. He almost declined. Triple pay usually meant triple nonsense, but rent was due, and his daughter needed new shoes for the school year, so he took the job. Now, standing beneath the body of a $60 million aircraft, Darnell could smell the danger. Literally. The faint scent of scorched rubber and fuel vapor was enough to make his stomach turn. Whoever last touched this engine had no business near aircraft. He reached deeper, eyes narrowing. The heat shielding was warped. A clamp near the ignition coil was too loose. The fuel line? Swollen. One backfire, and this jet would have turned into a mid-air fireball. Darnell muttered under his breath. Someone's either stupid or planning something. Behind him, a group of men in tailored suits were watching through the hangar glass, arms crossed, faces smug. One of them laughed. Another pulled out a phone to film. That's when Cassandra walked past them all. And that's when she spoke the words no one expected from a woman in her position. Darnell stepped back from the engine, slowly lowering the panel cover. This thing's not just broken, he said, meeting her gaze. It's been tampered with. Cassandra didn't blink. Show me. He hesitated. Then she surprised him again. She pulled off her sunglasses, eyes sharp and blue as cut glass, and took a step closer, heels clicking with purpose. I've flown since I was 16. Built my first kit plane at 19. I know what a stressed frame smells like. This one's been cooked from the inside. Darnell gave a short nod. Exactly. Someone rerouted the heat exhaust, fed pressure back into the main line. Her brow furrowed. Could it have been an accident? No, ma'am. This was intentional. Quiet. Delayed. Perfect for a crash over water. Silence fell between them. The wind shifted, carrying the distant sound of an engine startup from another hangar. Cassandra exhaled slowly, eyes still locked on the aircraft like it had betrayed her. I have to fly this jet tomorrow morning. I was heading to Houston for a military contract. Then don't, Darnell said flatly. She turned toward him again. What if I told you you're the first one to see it? My team cleared this bird yesterday. Then your team's either blind or bought. Another silence. Then Cassandra said something that would change the direction of everything that followed. Can you stay? I want you to check every inch of this aircraft. I trust you more than I trust the men in that glass tower. Darnell hesitated. That's not wise. I don't belong in your world, Miss Vale. Cassandra tilted her head. The late sunlight caught the curve of her neckline, softening her elegance into something unexpectedly human. Then maybe my world's the one that doesn't belong. Outside, the sun was beginning its descent. The heat softened, but the air remained thick with pressure like something bigger was about to ignite. Darnell looked once more at the jet, then at the woman who had just asked him without asking to step deeper into something far more dangerous than a mechanical repair. He looked down at his hands. Scarred, greasy, solid. Then, quietly, he said, "I'll stay, but I'm not here to impress anyone." And Cassandra Vale replied, not missing a beat, "Good. I'm tired of being impressed. I just want the truth." Darnell Hayes didn't mind being under things. Cars, engines, systems people forgot about until they failed. He was used to being the one no one noticed, until smoke started rising. But tonight was different. The jet loomed silent above him as the last rays of Georgia sunlight faded into bruised orange. The hangar crew had gone home. The executives in suits had vanished behind tinted windows. And Cassandra Vale, now barefoot with her heels slung in one hand, stood off to the side with her arms folded and her lips tight. She hadn't said much since asking him to stay. Neither had he. Darnell lay on a wheeled creeper beneath the aircraft's fuselage, flashlight clenched between his teeth, a bundle of wires spread above him like an exposed nervous system. Every click of his wrench echoed into the quiet. The farther he dug, the more it didn't sit right. Someone had touched this jet recently. Someone who either didn't know what they were doing or did, and wanted it to go unnoticed. The rerouted pressure valve was subtle, smart, enough to delay detection until altitude stress cracked the frame. But the giveaway was the insulation, a different brand, newer than the rest of the surrounding material. Deliberate and recent, Darnell muttered under his breath. Somebody's setting this bird up for a fall. A voice answered him softly. "Are you always this calm when you find a bomb?" He rolled out from under the jet slowly. Cassandra was watching him, her dress now dusted at the hem with flecks from the tarmac. Her hair was pinned up, but a few strands had escaped, brushing her cheekbone. He sat up, wiped his hands, and said, "That wasn't a bomb, yet." She tilted her head. "But it could have become one." He nodded once. "Midair ignition. Quiet failure. It would have looked like pilot error." There was a long pause. Then she said something that caught him off guard. "My father died in a crash like that." Darnell said nothing. Cassandra stared at the jet. "They said it was mechanical failure, but I never bought it. He was flying a prototype we weren't supposed to release yet. The report said he overloaded the fuselage, but my father didn't make mistakes." Her voice cracked, not loud, not dramatic, but enough to let Darnell hear the fracture. She blinked, gathering herself. "When I took over Vale Aerospace, I promised myself I'd never let incompetence or sabotage bury another name." Darnell stood up, brushing off his pants. "Then you better start asking the right people, the right questions." She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw something shift in her eyes. Not coldness, not calculation, conviction. Inside the hangar's side office, the lights hummed low. A coffee maker burbled weakly. An old mechanic white, mid-60s, oil stains on his denim overalls leaned against the wall sipping from a metal thermos. Albert King. Darnell had met him once years ago at a Navy base in Pensacola. Didn't expect to see him here. "You still use that rusty 10mm socket?" Albert asked without turning his head. Darnell smiled faintly. "Still gets the job done." Albert took a sip, then said, "Quieter this time. You saw the reroute, didn't you?" Darnell nodded. "And more. Someone's been inside this bird. Real recent." Albert set the thermos down. "I told Cassandra to hire someone who ain't on payroll. Someone who still works with both hands, not spreadsheets." He paused, then added, "But be careful, son. There's a reason this hangar stays half-lit at night." Outside, Cassandra stepped away to answer a call. Darnell leaned against the wall of the office, arms crossed. He could hear her voice rising, not panicked, but edged. "Number, don't reschedule Houston. I'm still flying. I said what I said. I trust the man who's actually in the engine." Silence. Then, "Yes, Jason. I'm aware of how that sounds." The line cut. She returned a minute later. "My brother thinks I've lost my mind." Darnell didn't flinch. "Then don't prove him right." She arched an eyebrow. "Was that sarcasm?" "No, ma'am. That was advice." Later that evening, under low shop lights and the whir of a cooling fan, Darnell walked Cassandra through the evidence. The melted insulation, the pressure imbalance, the corrosion on the valve that couldn't have occurred naturally in this time frame. Each point, he explained with short, clear terms, no jargon, no ego. She listened, didn't interrupt, just absorbed. Then she said, "So whoever did this wanted the jet to fail mid-flight, but not immediately. Delayed sabotage." Darnell nodded. "And done by someone with deep access. Not just any tech could pull this off. This took planning." "And silence," she added. He looked at her. "You sure your brother's clean?" Cassandra didn't answer, but her silence said enough. As the clock crept past midnight, Cassandra kicked off her heels again and sat on a toolbox across from Darnell, who was now rechecking the stabilizers. They sat in silence for a moment. Then she asked, almost casually, "You always work this late?" "Only when someone's life depends on it." Cassandra stared at him. "That's an exhausting way to live." Darnell shrugged. "Beats pretending nothing's wrong." She smiled, not the polished kind she wore in boardrooms, but something smaller, realer. Then she said, "You remind me of my father." Darnell looked up. "That a good thing?" Her voice dropped. "It's the best thing I've said to anyone all year." By sunrise, Darnell had barely closed his eyes. He'd slept for 2 hours on a bench beside the tool cart, a folded tarp for a pillow, the scent of burnt metal still lingering in his nose. His hands were cracked, the grease embedded too deep to wash out in one rinse. But the fatigue didn't matter, because something still wasn't right. Across the hangar, Cassandra Vale walked toward him, hair tied into a loose knot, wearing a slate-gray hoodie and yoga pants, a far cry from the tailored elegance of the night before. She carried 2 cups of coffee, one black, one with cream. "I guessed," she said, handing him the black, "just based on how grim you looked at 2 a.m. Darnell took it, nodding a quiet thanks. "I've had worse sunrises." She sat beside him on the bench. "I haven't." The air was still. Even the sound of distant jet engines from neighboring hangars felt muffled. But inside Darnell's head, gears were turning. The aircraft wasn't just tampered with, it had been prepped. Clean cuts, hidden reroutes, thermal tape that blended perfectly unless you knew where to press. He took a breath. "Someone on your team," he said, "has both the access and the knowledge." Cassandra stared down at her coffee. "I know." "You know who?" "I have a guess. But guesses don't hold up in boardrooms or court." Darnell turned to face her. "Then we prove it." By mid-morning, Albert had pulled up a service log from the internal maintenance system. Every technical entry was tagged with a badge ID. On paper, it looked clean. Too clean. No flags. No incomplete tickets. "That's never how it works," Albert muttered, squinting at the screen. Cassandra crossed her arms. "You think someone wiped the audit trail?" Darnell leaned over. Someone built a fake one." He pointed. "These 3 entries were all logged by the same ID tech, 1422B. But that guy left your company 6 months ago." Albert tapped the mouse. "If that's true, this whole system's compromised." Cassandra stepped back, eyes narrowing. "Only 2 people can override our tech logs, myself and my brother." Outside, the hangar doors slid open. A black Cadillac Escalade pulled in, silent as a whisper. Jason Vale stepped out, hair combed to perfection, wearing a pale blue blazer and a grin designed for stockholder conferences. He carried a leather briefcase and the weight of someone used to being the smartest person in the room. "Morning, sis," he said cheerfully. "I heard you had a mechanic sleepover." Darnell didn't move. Cassandra's expression didn't change. "Morning, Jason." He glanced around the hangar. "Well, it's certainly nostalgic in here. Smells like a high school auto shop. No suits allowed past the line," Darnell said evenly, pointing at the yellow floor tape that marked the work zone. Jason raised a brow. "Ah, you must be the man under the bird." Darnell nodded once. "And you must be the one who tried to kill it." Jason laughed, not with amusement, with insult. "Cassandra, really? You brought him in to lecture me on sabotage? What's next? Hiring a janitor to run diagnostics?" "I hired someone who gave a damn when the rest of you didn't," she said quietly. Jason turned to her, tone shifting. "We've got investors flying in tonight. That jet was supposed to be airborne. You grounded our most valuable asset on the word of someone not even in our system. Cassandra stepped closer, her voice low but firm. He's the only one who didn't lie to my face. Jason leaned in, voice almost a hiss. You're jeopardizing everything Dad built. She didn't blink. No, Jason. I'm trying to protect it. After Jason stormed off, silence settled again. Albert whistled under his breath. That boy talks pretty. Shame his hands are too clean to hold a wrench. Cassandra sat down heavily on the workbench. He'll try to bury this, reframe it, maybe even flip it back on me. He won't have time, Darnell said, stepping away from the fuselage. Because we're not done. She looked up. What now? Now, he said. We check the backup fuel module, the one hidden under the rear belly. That's where you sabotage a plane when you want it to pass inspection but fail in flight. Her eyes widened. That compartment hasn't been touched in years. Exactly. An hour later, Darnell was on his back beneath the jet again, shoulder deep in a narrow bay coated with dust and time. He found it, a pressure valve spliced with a fiber connector that didn't belong, not part of the manufacturer's kit. Darnell photographed it, bagged a sample, and called Cassandra over. This is your proof, he said. It connects directly to the altitude control system, and whoever installed it used tape only sold through Vale's prototype department. Cassandra went still. That department reports directly to Jason. Darnell met her gaze. He was never targeting just the aircraft. He was targeting you. She exhaled, long and slow, then said, more to herself than anyone else. I trusted him with my father's legacy, and he put a detonator in the wings. That evening, Cassandra didn't go home. She stayed in the hangar, hair undone, heels forgotten, dress from the night before still hanging in the corner. She watched as Darnell sealed the fuel module, double-checked every bolt, and closed the panel like it was the lid of a casket. Will it fly? She asked. Yes, he said, but now it won't kill you. She stepped forward, slowly. Why did you stay? He didn't look at her at first, just stared at his hands, then said, because someone needed to care more about the person in the seat than the price of the fuel. Cassandra blinked. Then softly, that's exactly what my father would have said. Darnell didn't believe in coincidences. He believed in metal fatigue, stress fractures, hairline cracks, things you could touch, measure, fix. People lied. Systems could be manipulated. But grease didn't lie. It told you where pressure lived, where heat built, where danger whispered before it roared. And this jet? It had been whispering for weeks. Now it was screaming. At 7:42 a.m., Darnell stood alone in the maintenance bay. The hangar was quiet except for the buzz of the overhead fluorescence and the rhythmic creak of the rolling ladder he'd wheeled into place beside the jet's underbelly. In his hand was a small vial of gray-black residue, the sample he'd extracted from the tampered fuel line the night before. Under microscope, it revealed what he'd suspected: a composite adhesive with carbon flecks not found in commercial-grade aviation sealants. It was military-grade, restricted, only available through 2 departments inside Vale Aerospace, prototype testing and advanced R&D, and both reported to Jason. Albert arrived with 2 coffees and a cigarette hanging from his lip. That the stuff? He asked, setting the cups down. Darnell nodded, sliding the file across the workbench. One of your own gave this bird a death sentence. Albert took a drag from his cigarette. Or someone wanted it to die, with her on it. He paused. You know she's not going to let this go, right? I wouldn't respect her if she did. Albert glanced at him. You respect her? Darnell didn't answer, but the answer was all over his face. Upstairs, Cassandra Vale was sitting in the glass-walled conference room alone, watching a loop of the internal inspection footage from 3 nights ago. The same 2 technicians kept appearing near the tail section. Known of them had a gait she knew too well. Vin Dawson, Jason's head of field engineering, former military, loyal, quiet, lethal in silence. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down. A text from Jason. Investors land at 3. I suggest you put on something corporate and stop playing with your mechanic. Cassandra stared at the message for a full 10 seconds before deleting it. Then she stood up, grabbed the sample bag Darnell had left on her desk, and headed back to the hangar. She found Darnell crouched by the right side landing gear, wiping grime from a hydraulic hose. This is military adhesive, she said, handing him the bag. He nodded without surprise. I figured, only 2 departments in this company can source it, both under Jason. I know, she exhaled. I want to ground him. Darnell looked up. You don't have proof that holds in court. But I have motive. You don't have a witness. Cassandra sat down on a nearby crate, crossing her legs slowly. Then maybe it's time we make some noise. They worked through the next 4 hours in tandem. Darnell inspected every last subsystem. Cassandra combed the personnel logs. Together, they built a timeline. When Dawson was on site, when the fake entries were logged, which shift supervisor signed off without a visual check. Piece by piece, the sabotage took shape. It wasn't random. It was orchestrated. Cassandra looked at the evidence laid out on the table. Photos, log printouts, timestamps, fuel records. You realize what this means, right? She asked. This isn't just corporate betrayal. It's attempted murder. Darnell stared at the jet, then replied, It means your life's worth less than your company's valuation. At 1:15 p.m., the hangar doors opened again. And this time, Vin Dawson walked in. Tall, quiet, military-cut hair. His navy blue coveralls bore a Vale aerospace patch, but his eyes scanned the room like he was still deployed. Miss Vale, he said evenly. Mr. Hayes. Cassandra stood. You here for maintenance? Dawson's gaze flicked to Darnell, then back. Jason asked me to run pre-checks before this evening's demo. There won't be a demo, Darnell said. Dawson raised an eyebrow. I wasn't aware you had that authority. Darnell took a step forward. I don't need authority to recognize sabotage. Silence. Then Cassandra said, Vin, I know what you did. I know you altered the backup fuel controls. I have your logs. I have residue from the tampered lines. I have your time-stamped movement from the surveillance system. Dawson didn't flinch, but a muscle near his jaw tightened. You don't understand what you're stepping into, he said. Then explain it, she replied. He looked between them. Then, to their surprise, he set his bag down. Slowly. I didn't want to be part of it, Dawson said. But Jason made it clear. Either I buried the plane, or he buried something else. What? Darnell asked, voice low. My sister's medical debt. He owns the company handling her care. She's stage 4. I was trapped. Cassandra stepped forward. So you endangered me? Dawson's voice cracked. Number I made sure the failure would trigger without fire. Altitude stall. Mid-air engine drift. It would have looked like a manufacturing fault, not a crash. You were still willing to let her fall, Darnell said, fury under his calm. I was willing to stall the plane, Dawson said. Not kill her. Cassandra took a long breath. I can't protect you, she said softly. Not after this. I know, Dawson replied, but I'll testify. You'll sign an affidavit? He nodded. And I'll bring the backup logs Jason didn't wipe. Darnell looked at him. You do that, and you might save more than your sister. That night, Darnell returned to his truck. The sun was low again, casting long gold lines through the slats of the hangar doors. He leaned on the hood, arms crossed, watching Cassandra through the windows as she dialed someone likely her board counsel. He felt the weight of grease still on his fingers, sweat on his back, the ache in his shoulders from lifting truth out of metal. Cassandra stepped out moments later, crossing the concrete with no heels, no makeup, no armor. She held up a single sheet of paper. He signed. Darnell took it, folded it once, and said, Grease doesn't lie, but people sure try. She smiled. Let's see how loud the truth can get. Cassandra Vale didn't cry easily. Not when her father's jet went down. Not at the shareholder meeting the morning after his funeral. Not when the board tried to replace her with someone who wore better suits and shook hands harder. She was trained by legacy and necessity to keep her spine straight, her tone level, her image intact. But now, standing in the hangar with Dawson's signed affidavit in one hand and the weight of betrayal on the other, she felt something worse than sadness. Clarity, the kind that scrapes you clean from the inside out. Darnell watched her closely from across the workbench. She hadn't said a word in 10 minutes. The hangar had emptied. Albert had gone to lunch. Dawson had left with a federal liaison Cassandra had called quietly, carefully. The only sounds left were the ticking of the wall clock and the low hum of the refrigeration unit in the maintenance bay. Darnell broke the silence. You okay? Cassandra let out a laugh short, sharp, tired. I'm wearing the same clothes I wore yesterday. I've had 4 hours of sleep, 3 cups of terrible coffee, and the man I trusted most just tried to collapse my aircraft with me inside it. She turned to face him. So no, Darnell, I'm not okay. Darnell didn't flinch. You don't have to be. She stared at him. You ever feel like the world keeps demanding you hold it together, just because you always have? He nodded slowly. All the time. Later that afternoon, Cassandra stood in the elevator at Vale Tower, 43 floors of glass, steel, and pressure. She was no longer in the grease-smeared hoodie. Now it was a navy sheath dress, pearl studs, heels polished sharp enough to leave marks. Her armor was back on, but the battle was different. Jason was waiting in the boardroom. The shareholders were too. Her father's portrait still hung over the far wall, his smile frozen in oil paint. She didn't look at it. She looked straight at Jason. What is this? He asked, tossing a thick manila envelope on the table. Affidavit from Dawson, Cassandra replied, plus a full log reconstruction from our internal systems. Jason's expression didn't budge. You realize what you're doing? I do. You're putting the company's name at risk. Our public value will crash. The press. She cut him off. You tried to kill me, Jason. That silenced the room. She leaned forward. You didn't do it with a gun. You did it with paperwork, backdoor overrides, and a scared engineer with a dying sister. I was protecting what Dad built, Jason growled. You were going to hand it to the military for pennies. You were going to bury me in a black box and collect the insurance. Meanwhile, back at the hangar, Darnell stood under the jet's wing, tightening the last stabilizer bolt. Albert walked in holding a brown bag lunch and a bottle of iced tea. Did she go through with it? Albert asked. She's in the boardroom now, Darnell replied. Albert whistled low. Takes guts to burn your own house down just to kill the termites. Darnell looked up. She's not burning anything. She's rebuilding. Albert handed him the iced tea. You always trust people that fast? No, Darnell said. But I trust what people do under pressure. Back on the 43rd floor, the board had gone silent. Jason stood by the window, staring out over the Atlanta skyline. You really think the board will side with you? Cassandra didn't hesitate. I don't care if they do. She turned to face the room. Because if they don't, I'll take the evidence to the FAA, the DOJ, and every single news outlet between here and Washington. You'd destroy your own company. No, you already did. She took a breath, steadied her voice. I'm just cleaning up the crash. An hour later, she returned to the hangar. Her heels clicked softly against the concrete. Darnell looked up from the workbench. Well? She set her phone down beside him. The screen showed one line of text. Jason Vale has been placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. Darnell nodded. So what now? Cassandra smiled barely, but it was real. Now we fix what matters. That evening, they sat on the hood of Darnell's truck parked just outside the hangar, 2 thermoses between them and the dusk settling in layers of gold. She leaned back. My father used to say, there are 2 kinds of people in aerospace, the ones who can afford to be wrong and the ones who can't. Darnell sipped his coffee. You're the second kind. So are you? They sat in silence, watching a training plane cross the horizon. Then Cassandra asked, softly, would you ever work for someone like me? Darnell looked over, eyes steady. I don't work for people, he said. I work with them. Big difference. She nodded. Then let's work. Cassandra Vale had stood in front of thousands. Government contracts, investor summits, defense symposiums. But she had never felt more exposed than walking barefoot across the tarmac at sunset, hair pulled back, no security detail in sight, side by side with a man who smelled like oil and moved like he didn't need permission to belong. And somehow, it felt like the most honest walk of her life. They had just stepped out of the hangar, the final inspection behind them, the sabotage contained, Jason suspended. But the real test was just ahead. Because at 6 p.m., a crowd was gathering outside hangar, 7 camera crews, Vale engineers, military representatives, even a few reporters tipped off by someone inside the company. And the one thing they weren't expecting to see was Cassandra Vale holding a mechanic's hand. Darnell didn't speak as they approached. His steps were steady, but his pulse beat like a slow drum behind his ears. He wasn't used to being watched, judged, sure, overlooked, always, but watched like this? Never. Cassandra leaned in, whispering just loud enough. You don't have to stay beside me, you know. I'm not here for them, he said quietly. I'm here because I didn't leave when I could have, and neither did you. At the front of the small stage set up beside the runway, Vale's interim board chair, Walter Greaves, a silver-haired man with the calm of a seasoned mediator, stepped to the microphone. He nodded to Cassandra, then addressed the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last 48 hours, this company has undergone a challenge, not of technical nature, but of moral integrity. And it is my duty to inform you. We passed that test, because one woman chose truth over legacy. Cassandra stepped up. The murmurs rippled. She was wearing a simple gray blouse, jeans, and flats. Her face bare, no makeup, no diamond earrings, just truth. And behind her, standing silent but steady, Darnell Hayes, in his faded flannel shirt and boots stained with jet fluid. Cassandra took the mic. Her voice, as always, was calm. But this time, it trembled not from weakness, but from the weight of what came next. There was an attempt to sabotage one of our test aircraft. Had it not been caught, lives could have been lost, mine included. The perpetrator was someone inside our leadership. And the person who saved us wasn't an executive. He wasn't on payroll. He wasn't even given a name badge. She turned slightly, glanced toward Darnell. He was just someone who refused to walk away from what he knew was wrong. She paused, eyes sweeping the crowd. And I will not let this company walk away from that either. In the back row, a reporter raised his hand. Miss Valliere, you admitting to a breach in corporate security? Cassandra didn't flinch. I'm admitting to a culture that forgot the value of people who do the quiet work. And starting today, that changes. Another voice called out, Is this the man who discovered the issue? Cassandra didn't answer. Darnell stepped forward. Just one step. Then he spoke out loud, not scripted. I didn't come here to be noticed. I came because a jet was broken. That's what I do. I fix things when they're broken. He looked at Cassandra. She gave me a reason to stay, and now I think maybe the whole system needs fixing. The silence that followed was heavy, reflective. Then slowly someone began clapping. One of the older engineers. Then another. Then the room filled with it. Not thunderous, but enough to say, We see you. That night, Cassandra and Darnell sat on the stairs just outside the hangar, sharing a paper bag of takeout fried chicken and watching the light fade off the edge of the runway. You didn't have to say anything up there, she said, licking salt from her fingers. I wasn't going to, he replied. But something in the room told me it was time. She smiled. That's what my dad used to say. There's always a right time to speak, even if your voice shakes. Darnell handed her the last wing. She shook her head. You take it. You did all the dirty work. He grinned. Yeah, but you made the call. They sat quietly, the hum of the airfield around them, the sky darkening to indigo. Then Cassandra asked, softly, Do you ever wonder why people trust machines more than they trust each other? Darnell stared out into the distance. I don't wonder. I know why. Why? He took a deep breath. Because machines fail loud. People fail quiet. Darnell Hayes hadn't been back to Willow Ridge, Alabama in nearly 15 years. Not since the accident. Not since the Navy sent a letter instead of a plane. Not since he folded his uniform in silence and buried his father's toolbox beneath a tarp in the barn. But today, he returned. Not as a ghost, but as a guest. And not alone. Cassandra Vale stood beside him at the base of the porch steps, the afternoon sun casting warm shadows through the hanging wisteria. She had insisted. Just a few days. No reporters, no conferences. Just real things. He hesitated when she said it, but something in her eyes reminded him of home, of what it used to mean. So here they were, and for the first time in years, Darnell didn't feel like he was running from anything. Inside the cabin, everything smelled like cedar and lemon polish. The floors creaked the same way he remembered. The old photo of his grandfather in his WWII bomber jacket still hung beside the bookshelf. Cassandra stepped inside slowly, almost reverently, her heels echoing softly. You didn't tell me you grew up in a place like this. Darnell smiled faintly. You didn't ask. She turned toward the photo. This him? she asked. Yep, he flew B-17. S called him flying tin cans, but he said the sky was the only place he felt equal. Cassandra's expression softened. She didn't respond, but she lingered at the photo longer than she needed to. Later that evening, they sat on the porch, 2 glasses of sweet tea between them, watching cicadas blur into the dusk. Darnell rested his boots on the old railing. Cassandra sat cross-legged in a linen dress, her tablet closed for once, her gaze drifting. I kept thinking, she said quietly, that fixing the company was about fixing the numbers, the contracts, the press. She glanced at him. But it was about fixing the people I ignored. You made me see that. Darnell chuckled, low and dry. I just tightened some bolts. You did the hard part. No, she said, voice firmer now. You taught me the hardest part, to listen to someone who doesn't sound like me. A car pulled up in the driveway. Gravel crackled. Out stepped a tall black woman with silver curls and a cane, Miss Loretta, the neighbor who practically raised Darnell after his mother died. She didn't speak right away, just squinted toward the porch. Well, I'll be. You finally brought home someone who doesn't smell like motor oil and regret. Darnell laughed. Cassandra nearly choked on her tea. Miss Loretta made her way up the steps slowly. Then she looked Cassandra over with a mischievous grin. You're the lady from the television, the one who made the news, for telling the truth. Cassandra smiled shyly. That might have been me. Miss Loretta nodded. Then you're welcome here. That night, under the creaking ceiling fan, Cassandra lay awake in the guest room. She stared at the wooden planks, listening to the night creatures sing. There was something about this place, raw, unfiltered, that stripped her down to the bone. It made her remember who she was before the private schools, the board meetings, the glossy interviews. She whispered into the quiet. Maybe people don't need more innovation. Maybe they just need someone to look them in the eye and see their worth. From the hallway, Darnell's voice echoed back faintly. That's what my mama used to say. Really? Well, she actually said. Don't be a fancy fool. Know who you're talking to. Same thing, really. They both laughed, a warm sound in the dark. The next morning, as dawn painted gold across the fields, Darnell stood at his father's old workbench. He pulled out the covered box. Inside, his dad's tools. A folded U.S. Navy flag, a faded photo of Darnell at 16, standing beside a jet, smiling like he hadn't yet seen the cruelty of rank and race. He held the wrench in his hand. It was heavier than he remembered. Behind him, Cassandra interred quietly. You ever think about coming back? She asked. Darnell didn't look at her. I never left, he said softly. Not really. Just stopped believing I could build anything that mattered. She stepped closer. Maybe that's why I came here, to remind you that you already have. As they stood there, the old barn silent around them, something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but something real. The storm rolled in just after 4 p.m., dragging thick clouds over the hills of Willow Ridge like a blanket of silence. Thunder groaned in the distance, slow and deliberate, shaking the old farmhouse window panes as the first drops of rain tapped against the tin roof. Inside the warm kitchen, the smell of cornbread lingered in the air. Darnell stood by the sink, rolling up the sleeves of his worn denim shirt, water still dripping from his hands. The muscles along his forearms flexed unconsciously, a reminder of a body shaped by years of labyrinth war. Behind him, Cassandra leaned against the wooden counter, her arms crossed, dressed in a form-fitting, elegant dress that contrasted sharply with the rustic kitchen around her. Her posture was poised, her presence commanding, but her eyes carried something softer. Then she said it. If I asked you to come back with me, would you? The question fell heavy, not like curiosity, but like a quiet dare. Darnell turned. To New York? To the company? To me, she added, her voice gentler than before. Silence held between them. Not uncomfortable but old, like a space carved by years of unfinished conversations. That night, they shared dinner with Miss Loretta. The old woman moved slowly but served generously bowls of hot stew, buttered rolls, and a pitcher of sweet tea that never seemed to empty. The rain pattered against the windows, steady now, a rhythm of memory and waiting. Miss Loretta sipped from her ceramic mug, then looked up with knowing eyes. Sweetheart, she said to Cassandra, if you want to keep a good man, Don't offer him a title, give him purpose. Cassandra looked across the table, searching Darnell's face for reaction, but he didn't smile. Instead, he pulled a worn paper from his back pocket, a resignation letter, yellowed at the edges and creased like it had been opened and folded 1,000 times. I wrote this the day I left, Darnell said, his voice steady. Never turned it in. Something told me. Someone might be worth coming back for. Cassandra reached across the table and took the letter. Her fingers lingered on the name at the bottom. D.H. That night, the rain deepened. They stood side by side on the front porch, both holding glasses of corn whiskey. The storm painted silver lines across the dark sky. I used to think you were just stubborn, Cassandra said, her eyes tracing the horizon. Darnell sipped. I used to think you were cold. I was wrong. I was too. He turned toward her. No games, no pride, just truth. I'll come back, Cass. But not for you. For the engineers in the shadows. For the janitors named Mary. For the interns nobody listens to. If you'll let me, I'll come back for them. She didn't speak. She just nodded. And for once, her eyes told the whole story. At dawn, the rain had stopped. A soft mist hugged the fields, and the sky opened in pale gold. Cassandra loaded her suitcase into the car. As she shut the trunk, something slid and dropped a small wooden box. Inside it was a neatly folded Navy flag and a single sheet of paper. She read it, breath-catching. The next time you sit with the board, place this on the table. You won't need to say a word. They'll remember who gave them a conscience. D.H. That same morning, at Sterling Aerotech headquarters in Manhattan, a meeting was underway. Executives, shareholders, and 2 news cameras crowded the glass conference room. Cassandra entered in a cream trench coat and heels that echoed power with each step. She said nothing as she walked to the table. No PowerPoint, no charts, only the box. She opened it gently and placed the folded flag at the center. The room shifted. One of the older board members whispered, "Is that?" A woman near him nodded, eyes tight. "Hayes." Cassandra looked up at them all. "I'm not here to protect your comfort. I'm here to protect this company's soul. And this flag belongs to the man who still believes we can be better." No one argued, because no one could. It began not with applause, but with silence. Monday morning at Sterling Aerotech was never quiet. But today, something was different. Word had spread fast, faster than corporate memos, faster than PR containment. Someone in the mailroom had taken a photo of the flag on the boardroom table. By noon, it had gone viral. Number, the flag on the table. Number Hayes was right. And by 2 o'clock, Cassandra stood before the company's entire engineering division, not in a conference room, but in the open hangar where the engines were born. She stood in heels, yes, but beside her stood Darnell Hayes, in boots dusted from Georgia soil, sleeves rolled, hands calloused but steady. The engineers, machinists, and interns gathered slowly, cautiously. They had seen these kinds of speeches before, top-down apologies, empty promises, but today, no script, no teleprompters, just Cassandra and Darnell, and a truth that couldn't be reburied. Darnell stepped forward. No microphone, just his voice. "You were lied to, not just by one man, by a system that believed silence was safer than integrity. I walked away once because I thought no one was listening, but I was wrong. Some of you," he looked toward a group of junior techs, "were listening all along." A hush fell. Cassandra followed, her tone deliberate. "The schematics for the HX-90 will be re-audited, externally. The whistleblower clause will now be written by those who have worn grease, not suits. And Preston Hale," she paused. "Preston Hale has been terminated, and a federal investigation is now underway for document tampering, workplace abuse, and potential threats to public safety. As of this morning, he's no longer welcome in this building or in this industry." A collective breath escaped the room. It wasn't just about justice, it was about relief. And then, in the crowd, an older voice spoke up. It was Harold, the janitor, the one who'd always kept quiet. "I cleaned that man's office for 14 years. He never knew my name. But Mr. Hayes, he used to leave me coffee. And one time, he fixed my granddaughter's bicycle in the parking lot." The room turned. Darnell didn't speak. He just nodded. The aftermath came in waves. First, the media, then the government audit. Then, the phone call from the Pentagon requesting Cassandra personally meet with defense ethics advisors. Sterling Aerotech had narrowly avoided a disaster, and the name Hayes now meant something again. And Darnell? He didn't take the VP position they offered. Instead, he formed the Hayes Integrity Initiative, a division inside the company staffed with veterans, retired engineers, and mechanics who'd been silenced before. Their mission: make sure no voice ever goes unheard again. He didn't care for titles. He cared about legacy. A month later, Cassandra found herself back in Georgia, the same porch, same stormy sky. Darnell was sanding down an old rocking chair. His sleeves were rolled. Again, she handed him a folder thick, bound in leather. The board voted. Full immunity. Retroactive benefits reinstated. Your Navy file has been declassified in part, including the commendation. He flipped through the pages slowly, then closed it. Not why I came back. She smiled. I know. A beat passed. Darnell, you never answered me. He looked at her. About what? If I asked you to come with me, not to New York, not to the company, to life. He didn't smile, but he took her hand rough, warm, certain. Only if I get to drive. They both laughed. Epilogue. 6 months later, a bronze plaque was mounted inside the Sterling hangar. Asterisk, to those who speak up, to those who stand alone until someone stands beside them. This company exists today because one man refused to let silence win. Asterisk. Underneath it, DH. And just below that, a folded Navy flag behind glass, but never forgotten.